We are now recording. Hello and welcome. Today's presentation is You Have the Power to Create Accessible PowerPoints. It is presented by me, Lauren Woodman. I'm a manager of instructional design and online learning and educational technology. I'm going to pop a link in the chat that is a link to this presentation if you'd like to follow along or take your own notes. All of my speaker notes are in the notes section of the PowerPoint, so you'll have those as well for reference. So before I dive into the presentation, I did want to let you all know about our accessibility certificate. So if you remember last spring, we did an accessibility month and project. This accessibility certificate is a bit more robust. If you watch some of the presentations, complete some mini projects, you will get a certificate. It can be worked on asynchronously because we are recording all of these, or synchronously. For each presentation you watch or attend, you'll receive a badge. And for each project you do, you'll receive a badge. And once you have accumulated the necessary amount, you will get your certificate. It's all done through Badger. So stick around to the end of this presentation and you'll get your badge for completing this training, as well as information about the PowerPoint project that goes along with it. And on this screen here, and I just put in the chat, is a link to our website, or you can scan the QR code to go to our website. And that explains the accessibility certificate, what it is, how you can get it, and has a link to all of the trainings, recordings, and information about the projects. So today, this presentation is about 20 minutes long, so it goes pretty quickly. If you want to see anything more in depth, we'll have time at the end. I can show you kind of how things work and we can test things out. But today we'll go over accessible templates and slide order. We'll talk about text and size, font, and color. We'll talk about alternative text for visuals. We'll deep dive into the accessibility checker, which is a great tool to make sure your content is accessible. We'll go over dictation. There's a short video for that that shows you how you can kind of easily write out or type out things on the screen or your speaker notes. And lastly, we'll talk about subtitles. And subtitles, a little preview you might notice now is that you'll see my words that I'm speaking on the bottom of the screen. Give me one moment. Okay, you'll see them on the bottom of the screen. And that is PowerPoint subtitles built in. So that's not Zoom or any other program. That's actually just PowerPoint. And so you'll see that at the end of the presentation as well. I should say, if you have any questions, you can feel free to chime in, and you can just unmute yourself and say something, or you can type it in the chat. Unmuting yourself is probably going to be a little bit easier because I don't always see the chat, but you can just unmute yourself. It's a small group, so I don't mind the interruptions. And welcome, Anne. Oh, I see she's still connecting the audio. Welcome, Anne. We're just getting started.
Oh, awesome. Great.
I was just going over the agenda, and if you have any questions, you can just chime in on your microphone or type it in the chat.
Okay, great.
Okay, so first up, we're going to talk about accessible templates. So this is a great place to start because we're going to talk about a lot of things today and how you can make a PowerPoint accessible. But if you want the path of least resistance, start with an accessible template. The way to do that is to open up PowerPoint and either select an existing template. Most of them are accessible, or if you want to make sure, type accessible into that search bar when you first go to open PowerPoint, and that will bring up all of the accessible templates. And that way you'll know that the default text, the default colors, the layout, the slide order, all of that is already going to be accessible by default. So you can kind of just plug in your information and do a quick accessibility check, and you should be good. Part of accessibility that we'll discuss later is the slide reading order. And this is something I see the biggest offender of accessibility in PowerPoint is having items on your slide in the wrong reading order. And that's not the reading order that you or I might read it, but that's the reading order for a screen reader. Screen readers, for whatever reason, read things listed in that selection pane from bottom to top. So you do need to have your items listed in the order that you would want a screen reader to read them, meaning your title would be at the bottom of the selection pane, not of the PowerPoint screen, but your title would be at the bottom, maybe your content or a paragraph of information, and then your image. And we'll talk about how to make sure your image gets read as well. So that is something that accessible templates have built in, and we'll talk about Accessibility Checker, which will help you make sure that you have that set up correctly as well. So for fonts, your best bet with fonts and colors is to use a simple sans serif font with adequate spacing between letters. And a sans serif font, that's just Latin for without feet. So if you think about Times New Roman, it has like the little lines at the bottom of the letters. That's thought of as with feet. So you want something that does not have those, and that's easier for a screen reader to read. So a good example of a sans serif font is going to be like Calibri or Verdana or Arial. Calibri is the default in Microsoft now. So if you stick with that default, you're fine. You want to avoid a compressed, fancy, italic, or underlined font. Underlines usually mean links. So you kind of just want to keep it basic. At least 18-point font size on your slide so that when you're displaying it, people can read it and it's not super tiny. And to make sure that your text is easily readable, leave some space on your slides, between paragraphs, above, below. Ideally, if you can, limit the number of lines on each slide to 7 and the number of words on each line to 6. Leave plenty of space above and below each line. And if you have more information that you want to show on a slide, consider either breaking that up and making multiple slides or using speaker notes. So when I shared the copy of my presentation, you'll see I have a lot of words in the speaker notes. You can direct your audience or your students to read those after the fact so that they have them later, but you're not crowding the slide with them. So typically, you might notice this slideshow does not follow kind of the default or what you usually see because it's a black background with white text. Usually you see white background, black text. Just keep in mind that super, super bright white background can make it hard to read, especially on a screen, because you get that bright glare. So if you're going to go with a light color, a white color, try an off-white background or cream color background. Or you can go like I did with a dark background and white text. If you have a light background, you want to make sure you have really dark text. So you want a lot of contrast. And to change the background color, you can go to Design, Format Background, and Color, and then pick a color that suits your purpose and change the font color to make sure there's enough contrast. And that is also something that Accessibility Checker will check for you and make sure that there is enough contrast in your text versus your background color. Alt text. Alt text is important for describing images in a document for individuals using screen readers. So if you have a chart, a picture, a screenshot of text, I see that a lot, or let's say a screenshot from a website of a really good graphic, that is all well and good. But if someone is using a screen reader, they can't read it. A screen reader is not going to read an image. It's not going to tell them anything, and it just gets skipped over. It just says image and it gets skipped over. Luckily, there is a way that's built in for you to add a description to that image so that a screen reader knows what it is. It can read it just like it reads the text. And an individual who's using a screen reader now knows like what that image said. Of course, it's up to you to put in that image and to make it something that's going to make sense. So you can right click on any image or graphic and go to Edit Alt Text. And then in the alt text pane, type in your description for the object. You'll notice it usually tells you 1 or 2 sentences. I think they might have raised that to 2 to 3 sentences, but you don't want it to be super wordy. Again, if it's a really long description or maybe a graphic that has a lot of words, you can use the speaker notes to provide more information about that. And if it's decorative or it doesn't matter, maybe it's just a little fun icon, you can mark it as decorative. And that way the screen reader knows that it's okay to skip it.
Wait, can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
So I have, like, in a lot of my slides, like, let's just say little snippets of code, right? So whether it's C++ or whatever, should that be marked as like decorative? Or, I mean, because it'd be like int x is, you know, semicolon, you know what I mean? I don't know, like, from your perspective, how would that be marked?
That's a great question. So if it's a picture of code, like a screenshot, let's say,
Yeah,
I would say that you would actually want to edit the alt text and type that in to that text box. Yeah. If it's something that students are going to need to know, if it's an example and you've shown a million examples and it's, you know, not relevant, then it could be decorative. But if it's like, here's your assignment. Now remember, this is only vital for someone who's using a screen reader. So if someone is visually impaired and they can't physically see it and they're using a screen reader, that's how they're going to get the information.
Okay. All right. So, and then would you say, Lauren, the same would go, like, let's just say you had a process mapped out, because we do a lot of that. Like, okay, if we're sorting this list, this is the order the first time through, and then the second time through, again, maybe do a little alt text there to bring that to life. Okay. So, all right. Just asking, sorry.
No, those are great questions. Another thing, and remind me at the end of this, I can show you, is to use some of Microsoft's built-in like smart art and chart. Like if you are doing like a flow chart or something.
Oh, I love smart art.
Yeah. Well, that smart art is readable because it's text and it knows to read it. Yes.
Oh, okay.
So
that's
if it's
awesome to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you don't have to worry about that. But yeah, rather than just like kind of doing a screenshot, you can use smart art and know that someone's able to read it.
No, that's really, I love smart art. I'm a big fan. So sorry about that though. Thank you though.
No, great questions. And for anyone who's wondering what smart art is, so this was just a list, for example, that I had created, and I chose smart art and I chose this visual from a long list of options. So it kind of makes creative graphs and lists and all kinds of things for you out of your plain text. All right, so accessibility checker. So I know I've hyped this a little bit, but this is kind of, as like I talked about, making sure you start with an accessible slideshow is your first step. This is kind of your last step. So let's say that you've created your slideshow, maybe you've done it from scratch and you're just not sure if there are any issues. You can go to review and click check accessibility. And then you'll get a report of any potential issues in your presentation. And that includes any missing alt text. If you have charts that don't have header rows or header columns, if there are any text contrast issues, so maybe you've got a white background with yellow text that isn't readable. If you're missing slide titles, if your slide order seems not quite right, it will tell you all of that information. And it will tell you exactly where it is. You can click on it to go to that particular slide or that particular issue and fix it right there. And a lot of these are very quick fixes. So I'm going to show a brief video about the accessibility checker so you can kind of see that in action. And I'm not sharing sound, so give me one moment. You get to hear the poppy music that goes along with this. Okay. All right, so that is the accessibility checker. As you can see, it's very easy and it's going to pick up on all sorts of issues. So it's a great kind of last final check as you're finishing up your content. Are there any questions about any of that stuff before I move on to dictation and subtitles? Because those are more like audio kind of tools. Good. Okay, great. So dictation. Dictation is basically speech to text transcription. So sort of how I'm speaking now and you're seeing those subtitles on the bottom of the screen. Dictation allows you to speak and have those words typed out. And you can use that. You could use that to type out just your content on your slides, but I think it's a really great tool to type out your speaker notes. It's great for creating a transcript of what you want to say in the notes section to make your presentation accessible for those who are deaf or hard of hearing. It's available for either the Windows version of PowerPoint or PowerPoint on the web. If you're a Mac user like me, Mac actually has a built-in tool to do that as well. So you can use it on basically any device. And you just click the microphone button, it will start listening. Put your cursor where you want the text to show up and just start speaking. It's great if you're typing your speaker notes, maybe as you're running through as a practice. And then the next time you do it, you have those notes there already. So you don't have to type them out and think about what am I going to say on this slide. When I do my speaker notes, I usually do them using dictation. And I'm going to show a brief video about dictation.
Hello.
Last year, we saw a 20% increase in sales. Now, most of this is attributed to...
The bear and her cubs hungrily searched the forest for berries. Awesome!
So as you can see, simple tool, really, I think more of a time-saving tool than even an accessibility tool. But even if you have like a hand injury or something, we had an instructor who had a hand injury and we were telling her, use dictation rather than typing out everything you want to say, because dictation is available in other Office products as well, including Microsoft Word. It's not just a PowerPoint thing. So something to keep in mind. And lastly, we are going to talk about subtitles, or what you might think of as captions. So as I said before, you are seeing the subtitles feature that I'm using now in at the bottom of my screen here. And those are auto-generated. It's very simple to turn on. You go to the slideshow and then subtitle settings, and you can choose the placement. So you can choose whether you want it above or below or overlaid. And you can also choose the language. So if your first language is not English, you can change the language, and you could speak Spanish and have the subtitles show in English. And you can also do that in reverse. So let's say you are giving a presentation to a group of French speakers. You can speak English and change the subtitle language to French, and it will translate what you are saying. So instead of seeing the English subtitles here like you see, if I change that to French, I would be speaking English, but the subtitles on the page would be in French. So it's an awesome accessibility tool, not only to kind of quote unquote caption for your students who are deaf and hard of hearing, but also to make it more accessible for individuals who speak different languages. And that's free, it's built in. That is available on PowerPoint for the web or the Microsoft 365 version of PowerPoint. So not PowerPoint 2019 or 2016, but the Office 365 version. We do all have access to that for free through Northampton. Just keep in mind that might not be the version that's downloaded onto your Office computer. If you have questions about which version you have, or if you want a different version, if you want the 365 version, contact IT, and they might be able to help you get that on your computer. So that's mostly all I have for you. I'm going to go over a couple short things and then we'll go to questions and demos. This is just some resources. You all have the slideshow. So these are live links. And a lot of this we covered, but there's some other tips for how to make your PowerPoint accessible to people with disabilities and how to create more accessible slides. Again, mostly things that we covered. And as promised, your badge for completing this, this training, you can scan the QR code, or you can use the link that I'm putting into the chat now to claim your badge, at which point you will be on the road to getting your accessibility certificate. And while you do that, I have put the link in the chat, so go ahead and click on that link if you haven't already scanned the QR code, because I'm going to flip to my last slide, which talks about the accessibility project. So as I said, this project is a part of your accessibility certificate. This is a really easy one. You're going to create an accessible PowerPoint. You can use an existing accessible template like I showed you, or you can create your own slides from scratch. All you need is 4 slides on any topic you want. You get bonus points if it's about your dog or your cat or something cute. 1 title slide and 3 content slides with the appropriate amount of text, appropriate text size and color contrast, all the things we talked about. You're going to put an image on each slide and make sure that there's alt text on that image. Make sure that the slide order is correct. And to check that, if you need, you can use the accessibility checker. It will tell you if the slide order is not correct. And then you'll upload your PowerPoint project. So again, like I said, you have this presentation. I'm going to go ahead and copy it again for those who didn't get it. So you can click on, these are live links again. So you can click on the links. You can also go to our website that talks about the certificate, which I am again putting into the chat. And that will have all the links for you to submit your project as well. So now's the part where I stop talking and I see if anyone has any questions or comments or wants to see anything else in action. Joseph?
Lauren, I have a question for you.
Yes, Joe.
What is it about the templates in PowerPoint that makes them accessible? Is there some set of criteria?
Great question. I don't know the exact criteria that Microsoft uses, but the, and I can actually, let me stop sharing this. That's not what I wanted to do, but here we are. Give me one moment. So not every font, not every color scheme. Can you see my PowerPoint, Joe?
Yes.
Okay. So not every font, not every color scheme is by default accessible, right? So we have some of these fonts here that are exactly what I told you not to do. Some that are fancy and curvy and, very cute, but not very accessible. By default, if it's an accessible template, it's going to have an accessible font. The color scheme is going to be accessible, meaning the contrast is correct. And it's going to have the correct slide order already built into those template slides, meaning it's going to prompt you to just insert a picture and it's going to make sure that the picture is in the right reading order, rather than kind of having things all over the place. And they tend to be a little bit more streamlined as well.
Geez, that last part sounds really good because I tend to be more scattered in the way I create my slides.
Yeah, and so I can actually show that. So if you go to File and you go New from Template, And of course that opened up over here. Let me drag that over. So this is the open screen you usually get. If you type in accessible, every presentation that comes up here is an accessible presentation. And so you see they still have interest, you know, they're still interesting. This is one that I've used before. You know, I might say, let's go minimalist sales pitch. It downloads the template for you, it opens it, and you can see that there are already slides built in here. It already has text. If I wanted to, I could just say, and you know, this is hint, hint for your project. If you want to, you could just say, this is my dog. And, you know, change out an image. If there's one here that has an image, you know, change it out to be an image of your dog. All of this is already accessible, but already have alt text. As you can see, the font is already accessible. The color scheme is already accessible. So yeah, Joe, you know, this happens to be 21 slides because it's for a pitch. Some of them are going to be shorter or longer, but it basically is already a pre-built accessible template or accessible presentation for you, just waiting for you to just change out their text with your own text.
Wow. That's great. No, thank you. I appreciate that very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
How do we hand the slides in that we're doing?
Great question, Anne. So on this slideshow, there is a link here, which I believe it's here in my speaker notes. So I'll pop that into the chat as well, but it's if you have the slideshow, you have access to it.
Okay.
And it's also on the website. So it's just a Microsoft form.
Okay.
Where you can upload information.
All right. So.
Okay, so what we have to do is create a PowerPoint with 4 slides, and then upload, where it says here, upload your PowerPoint project here.
Correct.
Okay. When? Like when?
Oh, so this project goes all year, so there is no rush.
Okay.
If and when you get it done, it'll be a big check mark. You only have to do, I think, 3 projects to get your certificate.
Okay.
So it'll be, you know, you'll be well on your way to the certificate, but you don't have to do it now. It runs, there is kind of no deadline on the accessibility.
Okay. Cool.
And it's not a requirement, you know, if you want the certificate, you need to do it, but
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. I'm like, homework. Wait, what? What? All right, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I learned a lot, actually. Gosh,
Oh, great.
It was very good, Lauren. Thank you. So,
You're welcome.
very good.
I don't think I knew any of this.
I'm going to stop the recording